So for my current work, I'm going to talk about two ongoing projects, and I'm going to tease one that's been on the back burner for a little while, but there's a reason why I'm going to bring it up. The first project, I'm currently in residency at Tarragon Theatre in Toronto to work on a shadow puppetry project called Ramla in the Desert. And the title screen you see here, it says Ramla wa Sahara, which is the Arabic translation of the title. Ramla means sand, but in this case, it is the name of a little girl. It's a fairy tale style story that came out of me trying to emotionally process, rationalize, and make sense of desert disappearances. I'd been researching desert borders and became aware of the scale of migrants and refugees disappearing in the Sahara. There's a documented border control strategy where states will use the desert and weaponize it to stem the flow of migrants. Deserts can be very hostile environments, but also when people unfortunately die in the desert, there is usually very little trace remaining because of the sun drying out the bodies, animals eating the flesh away, sand moving and covering them over. If you can't count people, you don't have to account for them. So it's a documented border control strategy which weaponizes the desert to disappear people trying to cross into other countries. The southernmost borders of northern African countries are militarized in this way. Now, the Sahara Desert crossing for migrants has been called one of the deadliest crossings on record. I was finding out all of this information and reading UNHCR reports and looking at work by advocates and researchers who examine desert border crossings in the Sahara, in the United States, in the Sonoran Desert, and trying to make sense of it and trying to really understand the scale and the scope and the kind of decision making and policy that informed this approach. And then the war in Sudan broke out, and what had been this academic study of testimony and documenting and other people became really, really personal. And I didn't know how to process it or how to make sense of it or how to understand it. And to be honest, I still don't. But Ramla in the Desert came out of that. And it was a friend of mine a while ago had said to me that fairy tales emerged out of trauma. And this is a fairy tale like story that did emerge out of trauma. I mean, not my own, but out of a traumatic event that keeps on happening to people over and over again. So Ramla in the Desert came out of this grief, anger, despair, and guilt and overwhelming helplessness. It's a story of a young girl who's in the desert with her family. She comes from a loving home, and one day she wakes up and finds that her whole world, her parents, her brother, her belongings have all disappeared. She goes off to look for them, and in the story, the truth is revealed to her. So I am the writer and producer of this tale, and we're using shadow puppetry because it's an accessible, simple, beautiful, and evocative way of storytelling, but also one that has like tradition and history and references that greatly inform the telling of the story. So here is Ramla. This is an earlier version of Ramla with her family in the desert. It's a live animation shadow puppetry. In case you were wondering about the mechanics of it, this is a two-person manipulated puppet. So you have to coordinate with somebody else in order to get her movements really fluid. So I'm working on this project with Heather Piper, who's a phenomenal human and incredibly gifted puppeteer, designer, creative and artistic director. Ramla is directed by Mabel Wanacott, who is also an incredible human being and an opera director based in Toronto. And the music is being composed by Walid Abdelhamid, who's a Sudanese multi-instrumentalist, also a phenomenal human being, because that's the only people I work with, but who's incredibly talented and tapped into the work and the energy that this tale needs. This is really interesting to me because I've never spoken this much about a project while it's been in production stages. This is our first rendition of the puppets, and we've just started world building, so I have no idea where this is even going to end up. I've never been so transparent and open with this process, This is very early stages. We're now in residency at Tarragon Theatre in Toronto. We'll be presenting the work in Toronto at the end of January. We're hoping that it'll have many different forms of presentation, whether it's live puppetry or recorded animation. The hope of it is that it draws attention to the plight of migrants in the Sahara, but also gives people a way to contend with grief and loss. So the second project is called The Observer Effect. It is also in residency, this time at the Theatre Centre in Toronto. And it's a public space speculative fiction piece that looks at the future impacts of surveillance and AI on racialized youth. And I'm talking about this one too, because when I was looking at world building, the environment of the performance, one of the things that was really interesting was when we talked about cameras and screens and all of that, is how would they figure in the future? And cameras operate in a particular way. You need glass, you need lenses to capture visuals. How you record and store it has changed over time. But the eye, the lens has not, or has changed nowhere near as radically as the storage medium. But the interfaces seem to be going a little bit more glass free. It's a project that's being developed in residency. We workshopped a performance last year, which was really exciting. Like, it takes place in public space with no barrier between stage and space or performance in everyday real life. And I'm currently working on another iteration of it, which is an audio recording that you can only listen to at the site that it's occurred in. And then this work comes directly out of my PhD, which looked at the work of women of color social justice activists across physical and virtual urban spaces. That's me in the corner. So the two other people are actors in the performance. The woman sitting next to me is an audience member. So you can see how closely this is an actual stage presentation, a workshop presentation. So we had an audience there. The project that I teased earlier on that is currently on the back burner is on fire. And the reason that I'm bringing it up today is because Erin O'Connor, who wrote Firecraft, is going to be doing a talk as part of the series as well. A while ago, I was invited to respond to an exhibition by the Toronto-based artist Tim Whiten called Elemental Fire. And I was invited to do so because of his work in glass and my work in sand, and fire being the translational thing in between both of our works. And so in responding to his work, I'd always been taken by the Prometheus myth, which tells us that fire was stolen from the gods and given to humans as an act of defiance. But also the fire that Prometheus stole came from Hephaestus's forge, which means that it was always a generative fire, a fire that was made to produce or create or transmute matter. So obviously this relates to my work on sand, which is a mundane everyday material with metaphysical properties. If fire is the element that has determined and enabled humanity's direction, sand is the material that matters most to what it means to be human. Without sand, our cities and technologies would be something that we can't even fathom or imagine. Without fire, sand couldn't achieve those. Sand is also one of the materials that provides access to collective knowledge that reveals the unknown and the yet to come. Sand and glass act as a portal for parallel worlds and future events. Like the looking glass, like glass is a portal. In researching fire, I came across these really cool images of fire burning in an orb-like shape when it burns in zero gravity. On Earth, flames rise up, countering the downward pull of gravity as heated air molecules push the flame upwards. In space, experiments on fire show that flames burn and creep slower. And there's also a bizarre fire behavior called flameless fire, with flames that are invisible to the human eye. These continued revelations about the nature of fire reinforce its enigmatic and mythic nature. And I like to imagine that fire learned how to behave differently when it was brought down to Earth and had to contend with a heavier gravity. I was at Haystack in June 2025, and there I interviewed craftspeople about their relationships with fire, metalsmiths, jewelry makers, ceramicists. And I was amazed at the extent to which working with fire is such an intimate process. And it's a really all-consuming sensory experience. I haven't personally experienced that, but I know that a lot of you have and know this, and I'm not telling you anything new. I'm still looking forward to learning more about makers' relationships with fire. I don't know where this project is going at all. It is extremely early stages. I don't even know what I'm doing with it, But I'm so excited to listen to Erin's talk and hear more about embodiment, complicity, and human non-human relationships through her perspective.
Thanks for checking out this Geek Shorts episode. This is just one of 10 chapters featuring the speaker's artwork, artistic practice, and direct conversations with the community. The full-length video, only publicly available for a limited time, can be found in the Geeks Talk subscriber archive, where you can also discover hours of content on even more contemporary glass artists and researchers. As a BIPOC and artist-led organization, GEEX redefines the culture of contemporary glass by canonizing artists and thinkers who have been historically marginalized in the field. If you'd like to support this effort, subscribe to GEEX and gain access to exclusive content. For more info, visit geeks.glass/support. Thanks to this episode's sponsors, listed on screen and in the video description below.